joining us for what promises to be a very insightful, very practical, and a meaningful discussion on a topic that we keep on hearing is something that is impacting our families and our schools, school avoidance and school refusal. For some children, stepping into a classroom and stepping out of their homes can feel like an insurmountable challenge. School avoidance and refusal are not just about a child wanting to skip school. They're signals of a deeper struggle that requires our attention, that requires our compassion, and that requires our collaboration. As parents, educators, and mental health professionals and community members, we all play a part in supporting students and finding a path forward that is right for them. And every student is an individual, and there are many different solutions that may be required. Tonight, we're bringing together experts in the field who'll give us an overview of this topic and actionable strategies that can help us better understand what school refusal, what school avoidance is, and how can we begin to address this complex issue. Before we dive into the webinar tonight, I want to remind you that you are welcome to submit questions in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to the questions as soon as we can. Tonight, we'll be hearing from Nicole Cascarelli first, and then we'll be doing some Q&A with Dr. Eliza Froelich. I'm going to read their bios shortly, but I just want to give you a quick recap of the events that are coming up in this webinar series. This is the second webinar in the In It Together series. They are a series of supportive webinars for parents to help them manage the mental health challenges that their children are facing today. We are extremely thankful to UJA New York for providing us with the support to make an event like this and all the events that we have in the series possible, as well as our school partners who have helped us spread the word with their school communities. I also want to thank Adiva Pomerantz, our program manager, for assisting in coordinating this series. After tonight's webinar, you'll be getting an email about the next event in our series on December 18 with Dr. Nachi Felt and Lisa Scheinhaus on navigating the challenges of ADHD throughout a child's lifespan. And there'll be a chance for parents to sign up for confidential consultation sessions with Dr. Felt after attending the webinar at no cost. After this webinar tonight, you're going to be getting a survey, and we'd love if you could fill out the survey because it helps us improve and provide these resources to our communities. And now let me introduce our panelists for tonight. Their bios are quite long, so I'll do my best to get through them. We have a really wonderful panel joining us. Nicole Cascarelli is a licensed mental health counselor at Cohen's Children's Hospital Mental Health School Partnership. Her work focuses on school refusal, and she specializes in using evidence-based practices like DBT, CBT, and mindfulness to support students. I remember speaking to Nicole in the summer while we were planning out this series, and Nicole mentioned that November is a time when school refusal and school avoidance really peak. So I'm really happy that we can work together on this event at this time. Nicole's educational background includes a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling from LIU Post, and she completed foundational DBT training through behavioral tech developed by Dr. Marsha Linehan. Her diverse training allows her to tailor her approach to each student's unique needs, helping them build coping skills and mastery in challenging areas. Nicole is proud to lead the school avoidance program for Northwell, where they work to empower students, families, and schools to navigate the complexities of school avoidance and mental health. After Nicole presents tonight, we'll be doing a Q&A with Dr. Eliza Froelich, who is the Director of Guidance and teaches Judaic Studies at Yavna Academy Middle School in Paramus, New Jersey. Eliza has a doctorate in school and child clinical psychology from Yeshiva University's Furkov Graduate School of Psychology, a master's degree and specialist certificate in school psychology from Queens College, a master's degree in Jewish education, and a Judaic teaching certification as well. She has been in this field for 29 years, and she's been at the forefront of incorporating social emotional learning in Jewish schools, and is also a mentor in the OU Women Initiative, Foundation of Community Mental Health Support for Women Community Leaders, and also a mentor of Prisma School Counselor Cohort. She also is involved in many other communal endeavors with NCSY and others as well. I think we're going to begin right now with Nicole. and give Nicole the floor. Again, just a reminder, if you'd like to put your questions in the Q&A, you're welcome to, and we'll do our best to get to them. And now I hand it over to Nicole.
Thank you so much, Dr. Namdar. Again, thank you everyone for having me. My name is Nicole Cascarelli. Again, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I actually created the school avoidance program for Northwell School Partnership. I'll tell you all about what we do in that program uh, in just a bit. However, I'd like to start the presentation with helping us understand what we're going to be talking about. One of the first things is really trying to understand what school avoidance is, right? Because it's somewhat hard for adults to understand, especially when it seems like this is somewhat of a new presentation, though actually school avoidance has been going on for quite some time. It does appear that numbers have increased since COVID, and so I'm sure that might be some of the things that you might notice. If you have a child who struggles with avoidance, we're going to talk about warning signs. We're going to talk about what sustains a child's avoidance and some of the functions of school avoidance and what drives this behavior. We're going to talk about what parents can do to support their children who struggle with school avoidance, what some of the evidence-based treatments are, how we can get the schools involved, and again, lastly, I'll tell you about our program at Northwell. So first things first, what is it, right? Again, school avoidance seems to be something of that seems to be more new. However, about a fourth of our student population is going to deal with this at some point or another in their academic development. And the way the research describes school avoidance is significant absenteeism from school. But school avoidance takes many shapes and forms and sizes, right? It doesn't necessarily automatically look like a child refusing school altogether. It might look like a kiddo going late to school. It might look like the child pleading to leave school early. And children avoid school for many different reasons. We do know that it's going to impact them the longer that it goes on. It's going to impact them not only at school, but it impacts them socially, right? With their friends, with their peers. It could impact them emotionally as well. And a lot of the time, what we're seeing with school avoiders is that there is an emotional basis that kind of is the root or the crux of the issue. A lot of the times we're seeing mental health concerns. I would say about 9 to 95% of the students who come into the school avoidance program have some type of depression or anxiety. Sometimes it looks like oppositional defiance, but for the most part, these kiddos aren't trying to defy the rules, right? A lot of the times they're just so uncomfortable in the school environment that they don't know how to tolerate all of that discomfort. They don't know how to tolerate the distress. So there is usually this underlying mental health struggle that the child is typically dealing with. Students might also avoid school because of social difficulties, right? Or academic struggles. And and other times, school avoidance has a less obvious reason, right? We do see, as Dr. Namdar had mentioned, we do see an uptick in avoidance, usually after big holidays, right? And so we have noticed that it can happen after a long weekend or a holiday break. It can happen after a child gets sick, right? Maybe they develop too much comfort at home. And again, other times there might be a less clear trigger. And that sometimes is one of the most frustrating parts of a child's experience because sometimes they don't even have the words to express what's going on for them, right? And so I always like to help my students understand what their avoidance does for them, right? Because we know that avoidance kind of works, right? If anybody in here said that they've never procrastinated before, I would struggle to believe that because we know that avoidance kind of feels a little bit good, right? It feels a little good in the short term, right? But then creates these longer term problems, these long term consequences. So at the top of my little diagram here, you're going to see that we have an anxiety provoking situation, right? Something flags to us that something's wrong, right, in our environments. And so we feel all this discomfort. Let's say we have a math test tomorrow, right? But we didn't study because maybe we were procrastinating and we took a nap instead, right? And so we get that anxious thought in our head, we get that anxious feeling in our bodies. My heart starts beating quick, my muscles get tense, I start sweating, right? So my body's alerting that something is going on, that I'm feeling uncomfortable. And so what is kind of the easy quick fix is to avoid, right? To remove myself from from the discomfort, right? And so I get some relief. I get short-term relief. And so the avoidance did its job, right? However, it usually leads to more long-term consequences, right? I didn't study for the test. Now I have to go to school and make it up. I've also missed a whole boatload of other assignments and classwork. And so the workload builds up. I still have this urge to stay home and my anxiety grows. Why does my anxiety grow? Because I didn't learn how to face it. I didn't learn how to tolerate the discomfort and take a more adaptive, a more effective path. Instead, I taught myself how to remove. Now, when I work with my kiddos, I like to help them understand this pattern because what's one of the most important things for kids to understand is, well, our anxiety is hardwired inside of us, right? It serves a purpose, it serves a function. The function of anxiety is actually to keep us safe. It's for protection, right? And so when we think about when I'm getting this alert, when my heart is beating really fast, am I unsafe to approach and to go to school, right? When I'm worrying about a math test? When I can factually say there's nothing that's going to cause harm to me, right? To take this math test, and we can reframe some of the thinking and encourage them not to procrastinate, not to pull back, not to avoid, but instead to approach, then in time, we're having the child learn how to re-regulate and we're having them learn how to decrease their anxiety over time because they're doing the more effective model. So this is kind of what we're hoping to teach kids. And we plug in all these different bits and pieces of coping mechanisms all along this model, but in a maladaptive way on the left-hand side, excuse me, we still have this math test. They think to themselves, what's the point? I'm failing. I'm already behind. I didn't study. I should just stay home and sleep. Right? I'm gonna feel that anxiety. I'm gonna feel the pressure on me, right? That heartbeat is still going. I'm still feeling tense, right? But if I give into this pattern on the left-hand side, the anxiety grows. We're not learning how to approach the situation. And so what we have to learn how to do is shift it to the right-hand side, to the more adaptive model, is change the thinking, right? We're still going to have that feeling, unfortunately, of that discomfort. But if we can change the thinking a little bit and help the student understand, okay, I gotta get good grades to pass this test. I'm still going to feel that ickiness. I might still have that intense heartbeat, but ultimately, if I can learn how to approach and I study even for just a little bit, right, I'm breaking the cycle, right? And so a lot of the work looks like plugging in some a different approach, right? Through an opposite action, through changing our thoughts, and unfortunately, asking our children to get a little bit uncomfortable in this work. It's it certainly isn't the easiest thing to ask a student to go to school and face their fears, and yet that's 100% what's necessary. So, some of the warning signs that we're typically seeing, right? Resistance to get up and out of bed. I've heard parents say that their child won't refuses to get out of the bathroom, refuses to get on the bus or out of the car. Parents can be in the parking lot and their kiddo will be really struggling to even get out of the car, right? We see students come to school tardy, sometimes try to get picked up early from school, right? Oftentimes I'm seeing headaches, belly aches, migraines that these kiddos are complaining of, these somatic complaints. At times we see students who even start to act out, right? And so sometimes if the environment reinforces that acting out behavior, the student might learn that if I up the ante, if I increase the, I start kind of having a tantrum, let's say, and mom or dad doesn't make me go to school, then they start to learn that they might do that behavior in order to kind of skip out, right? And so again, we have to kind of restructure that, give the parents lots of skills in order to kind of play the course. And I'll give you some tips on how to do that. However, we start to see that these small pleads to stay home start growing, and they don't, and so the tardiness kind of, it might turn into, instead of being 15 minutes late for first period, now I'm going in by second and then third, and then maybe it turns into full day absences, which then unfortunately can tend to grow. However, with support and intervention, it is certainly doable to relearn an appropriate model.
Nicole, if I
Yes,
could just interrupt for 1 minute, we have a question that just came in.
please.
Hi, at what age are you referring to when mentioning the child? Does this apply to preteens and teens?
Yes. Yep. All I'm talking more like 5 years old to like 17 years old.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you. All right. So, as I mentioned before, I want to help you understand what drives this behavior. I showed you that cycle, right? And that's a pretty general model. However, there are four functions of school avoidance, and this is based on work by Kearney and Albano. They actually developed a school refusal assessment scale that helps us understand again what is driving this behavior. So it's broken down into these two subgroups. Students avoid school for negative reinforcement and for positive reinforcement. Now, when you think about negative reinforcement, we're really talking about where a student removes himself from school because they want relief, right? They feel so icky, so uncomfortable, they don't know how to tolerate it, and so they remove themselves, right? It's kind of like negative reinforcement is like for anybody who has the type of car that has that safety feature and it just yells at you when it to put your seatbelt on, right? That really obnoxious sound is so annoying to us that we want to clip in, right? And so sometimes for students, when the school environment is so overwhelming, we see an increase in avoidance, right? So in function one, it's more general. So that might be taking tests, right? Or loud hallways or crowded cafeterias, right? And so they want to remove themselves from the school environment that's going to provoke some type of negative affectivity, some negative emotions that they don't want to deal with. Right. And so what we have to do, the way that we treat this is lots of psychoeducation. So again, we were going to break down that model, help them understand again what's driving this behavior, and give them some coping skills to deal with that the heartbeat, right? And the sweating and the tense muscles so that we can hopefully help them tolerate that physiological discomfort. We're also going to create a gradual exposure plan potentially to help them slowly but surely, and I'll give you an example of this later in the presentation, but to slowly but surely re-expose them to all their school day and the school environment so that they can help regulate themselves again, right? Because we want to bring down the negative symptoms that's decreasing attendance and help these students learn how to cope with the school-related discomfort. In function two, it's more socially based. So in function two, we're thinking of more maybe your child was bullied, right? Or the student is new to the school and they don't have many friends, or they have a really intense social anxiety, right? And so they want to escape aversive or social or evaluative situations. So again, lots of psychoeducation here, but we're really harping on the social skill building here. We really want to do these role plays, practicing real life scenarios, you know, coming up with a dialogue. What do I tell my friends? I've been out for so long, right? So that we can help them kind of get into the groove of what they're going to say as they're easing back into the school environment. And in time, we're going to try to restructure, like I was saying before in that model earlier, in that diagram, we're going to have to restructure the way that they think about school just a little bit. Because sometimes these thoughts that we're having, right? Sometimes it's not the event that we're so nervous about. It's what we think about the event, right? So maybe it's not the math test itself that we're so worried about. It's what we think could happen afterwards, right?
Nicole, sorry,
Mm.
we have another question that came in the Q&A.
Sure.
What if the child is consistently avoiding work at school with teachers and behaviors are aggressive and intense when asking to do work? I know we're speaking about school refusal and school related anxiety. And, if this is a question that we can answer later, we can leave it for then. But if you could just briefly comment on this.
Um, again, I'm reading that in the chat. So we're what we can do, and while we're in the beginning stages of trying to reacclimate that student into school, is actually ask for some accommodations at school, maybe pulling back on some of the work initially. And again, we will talk about this later in the presentation, but if we can take off some of the pressure to begin with and then slowly but surely kind of pile it back on so that we can kind of target one thing at a time, right? If the aggression is escalating, then we're going to want to target that first, right? And so if that means that we have to remove some of the stress that's on them and some of the trigger, then we might consider doing that so that we see a decrease in some of those negative behaviors. Good question. So function 1 and function 2 are to be dealt with individually. One-on-one with the kiddo, that individual therapist will help kind of work through the psychoeducation, restructuring of their cognitions, their thoughts, their feelings, and again, giving them some coping skills that are going to be helpful to ease back into reentry. In function 3 and function 4, where students stay home because they actually want some type of reward. Now, it's not to say that parents give their student $5 a day for staying home, right? We're not rewarding them like that. However, sometimes other things in the home environment can be rewarding, right? And so in function 3 and 4, we're working with the parents specifically, okay, and the family, but mainly we want to really kind of give the parents lots of skills to deal with these types of presentations. Because in function 3, students stay home because they actually gain attention from their parent or caregiver, right? And so a student isn't going to say, yeah, mom and dad ignore me, right? They're not going to do that. But what we have to encourage the families to do is actually not give unnecessary attention if that student does stay home from school, because love is reinforcing, right? And if a kiddo got to hang out with their parent and watch TV instead of go to school, that's probably a lot more fun than going to school and having to face their fear. Right. So we have to give the parents the skills necessary to address these problematic behaviors. And really, our goal is for you to focus on the positive behaviors and their school attendance and their doing their homework and doing a few of their chores and again all of those positive behaviors, waking up on time, as opposed to harping on the negative stuff. All right, because we want to empower these kiddos to get back into the flow. In function 4, we see a student stay home from school because they want to gain other types of rewards. So again, you're not giving your kid $5 a day for staying home. Rather, is that child sleeping all day? Are they on their phones? Are they playing video games? Are they leaving the house and doing fun activities? Because sometimes that happens, right? Especially when a child doesn't have supervision. If the parents are at work all day, it's really hard to remove some of those rewards. And yet that's actually what's necessary, is we want to talk about these things, have a contract, have an understanding. If you stay home, we have to actually remove the rewards for staying home, right? So that means electronics and, other fun activities. And we actually then want to give them rewards for going to school. Now, some parents also struggle to understand why that might be necessary to reward a kiddo for going to school, right? We all work, right? Adults work for a reason. I'm very lucky. I get to, be hopefully a positive impact, have a positive impact on people, right? But let's be honest, we all have to work because we need a paycheck. And kids don't get a paycheck, but they get their paycheck in all different ways, right? Wi-Fi, their phones, their clothes, new sneakers, right? They get all that. And so I want to encourage families to do is actually have your child earn those things, again, through positive behavior. Right? So then again, we're taking away rewards for staying home, but giving rewards for going to school. So it kind of sweetens the deal for the kiddo a little bit too, especially when they get a little upset if they understand that they are going to have, some of these privileges taken away, or that they will then become earned. So the school refusal assessment scale is going to help us understand what are our leading drivers here. And we're going to target the 2 highest scores. And that's going to help us determine what our next course of treatment would be. So how can you beautiful people help? Right? What can we do as family, as supports for these impacted students? Right? First things first is that we want to listen to our kids. We want to deepen this connection. We want to validate them. We want to understand what's going on. Some parents really struggle to understand that. Some parents don't think that their child might be uncomfortable or anxious to go to school, or we don't know if they're telling the truth if they're sick every day, right? And so if we can use that active listening, validation, we stay away from these power struggles, right? The calm down, or, you're not sick, you're not worried, things like that is invalidating, and that might break the trust. And so we really want to validate our kids and and help them kind of again understand what's going on and the consequences of not being in school. Right. And while we do that, we come up with a plan with them, right? We come up with a morning routine, a nighttime routine, a sleep routine. Sleep is super important across, in this population. But we want that child to feel like they have control in the situation, right? Both at home and at school. So helping them create structure and a routine is a really helpful tool that we can use. That, along with collaboration from the school and helping the school come up with a plan, right, with accommodations if necessary, like we were talking about, so that again, there's predictability for that kid, and they feel like they have a leg up because they are being heard and their opinions are being taken seriously. With that being said, like I mentioned before, there has to be consequences for negative behavior, right? Because again, we're all conditioned in that way too. If I speed on the highway, I can get a ticket, right? And with school avoidance, that too is breaking the law, right? And so consequences have to be clear and consistent and non-rewarding, right? So if you don't go to school, you won't have your cell phone, you won't earn it back until you go. Or you can't go out with your friends if you don't go to school on Friday, right? On the weekend. We want to be clear, like I said, help them really understand, how their behavior will impact them, and use positive reinforcement through praise, encouragement, cheerleading, right? For all the behaviors that we want to see, and helping them make the connection between what they do and what a beautiful impact it can have on not only, uh, their school attendance and academic standing, but also just socially, emotionally, and so on. So how can we really effectively communicate with these kiddos, right? We like I mentioned, we want to be kind and we want to be firm. That's what we call a dialectic, where you can do two things that appear to be seemingly opposite, but they can be true at the very same time, right? Like I can be working really, really hard at my attendance, and I can also be really unmotivated, right? And so I could be working really, really hard, and I can also be working harder, right? They're both true. And so we really want to validate the feeling while again setting that expectation. Very clear, very concise. Using your active listening. All right. Of course, we want to be communicating when everybody's calm, right? If you need to take 5, you take your 5. Right? Try not to talk over each other and really try to understand those challenges that the kid is going through. As I mentioned, we want to remain calm. We want to model effective coping for these kiddos, right? Of course, it's easy to get frustrated. Of course it is. That's how your whole day starts too, right? It's kind of wrestling with your kiddo to get to school, right? But if your child senses that stress, it could fuel your, the child's stress as well, right? Because that energy is somewhat transactional. So if what we can offer the affection when it's appropriate, right? And even, modeling other healthy coping mechanisms, splashing cold water on her face, holding a stress ball, whatever it might be. All right. Of course, these messages clear, consistent, right? We want to make sure that we have this plan, everybody's on the same page, right? It's a discussion. We help them mentally prepare, right? Do one thing at a time. If your child is starting to kind of escalate, right? Let's just focus on getting dressed. Okay, great. Then brush your teeth. Awesome. When that's done, meet me downstairs. I'm making you pancakes, right? I'm making this up, right? But again, lots of strategies for coping, helping them really stay focused on their tasks, and using these contingency management strategies, which is behavioral modification, right? Rewards require positive behavior, right? We don't reward for promises. We want to make sure that the positive behavior was demonstrated first, and then we get the reward afterwards, right? We don't get paid up front when we have to wait, right? And so same thing, right? Positive behavior first, reward second, and then the negative consequences or the punishments for their school refusal or avoidance.
Nicole, I just want to say we're getting so many questions in the Q&A, and this is really, really
Cool.
wonderful. I know that Nicole has many of the answers to the questions that people are sending in throughout her presentation. So what we're going to do is just continue with the presentation, and then if we could just leave a little bit of time to just ask some
Definitely.
clarifying questions at the end. And again, many questions are coming in. We are going to be sharing the recording after the webinar.
Thank you. So just an example of how to verbally support your kiddo. All right. First things first, you observe what they're going through, right? You notice that they're breathing heavy, or you're noticing that they're shaking their knee, or whatever it might be, right? You observe it, and then you put words onto that observation, right? Don't make interpretations. We really want to stay really descriptive and factual. So I notice that you seem nervous, right, about going to school because you've been asking me to stay home, right? You even told me that you were feeling anxious, right? Validate the feeling. We all feel nervous sometimes. I know it can be really uncomfortable. I know you don't feel prepared for that math test. I would be nervous too, right? And then redirect, right? Going to school is really important. Crush it. I know you can crush that math test. What are some of the things we can do to get you there, right? Motivate them. Like I mentioned, cheerlead them on, give them that positive energy so that we can, again, hopefully get that ball rolling. And of course, we want to respect their feelings without empowering their fears. Again, if there's nothing that's threatening in the school building, then we don't want to fuel up that anxiety because then our anxiety is teaching us something false. It's actually sending us false information, which totally happens sometimes with emotions. They're tricky, right? And so we really want to validate them without empowering them or exacerbating them, right? So the goal is not to eliminate that the child has anxiety. That's really honestly not going anywhere. It's the intensity that we're going to work to alter because we're hardwired with Marshall Lenehan believes 10 emotions and they all serve a function, right? So we we don't want to continue to avoid things, right? We want to challenge them a little bit, right? Because again, more avoidance just breeds more anxiety. We want to express the positive but realistic expectations. All right. And again, encouraging your child to face the fear, not pull back from it. All right. Trying to keep those anticipatory periods short, right? And helping them process through, helping them think these things through. So how can we get the school involved, right? This was the question that we had earlier about, well, what if there's, the schoolwork itself is the trigger, right? Or there's so much schoolwork that has built up and I don't know what they're so anxious about catching up and we don't know what to do, right? We want you to bring these things to the school. Notice again, you're observing everything, right? So keep track of those behaviors, those patterns. Is it in the morning? Do they get the Sunday scaries? Does it happen usually on Mondays? Do we usually see it where they're not going to school by third period, right? What did you do that morning that worked to get them into the school building, right? Taking track of all of this so that we can really kind of put the pieces together, right? Once you gather your information, present it to the school, right? Request that meeting, collaborate with the school team, and see if they can make some accommodations. Now, some schools are willing to make unofficial accommodations for kiddos, meaning they don't necessarily have to be classified through special education. So they don't necessarily have to have an IEP or a 504. Some schools are outstanding like that, where they'll just say, no problem. We want this kiddo in the building. We're going to help figure that out, right? So they might decide to pull back on some of the coursework. Maybe you meet with the school guidance counselor, social worker, psychologist, right? And they speak with the teachers and advocate for that kiddo. They don't have to take the test, or they don't have to be doing the group work, right? They'll make certain accommodations for that kid in that school. Maybe they'll meet that child in the parking lot when they're struggling to get out of the building. Maybe they'll meet with them periodically throughout the day, give them a little pass so that that child can take a break. They're getting too worked up, too anxious, right? Maybe they'll adjust their schedule, truncate their day, and they'll help create a plan that, again, evokes that predictability for that kiddo, so that they know what their what their breakdown is day to day, right? Building support networks, of course, in the community, right? Carpooling in the morning sometimes helps get that kiddo up and running, with creating after school activities with their friends, and encouraging the extended family to get involved. Let's say parents can't be home because they have to go to work. Who else can come in and supervise that child? Make sure that they have a lot of structure throughout the day and less rewards, right? What teachers does a child connect with? What coaches, has that student played on a specific team, or club advisors, right? Religious figures, neighbors, as many people in the community that we can get to kind of, again, help get that ball rolling can certainly be helpful. And while we do so, having everybody kind of have a similar dialogue, right? Focusing on, the expectation, focusing on praising the days that they made it to school, not necessarily scolding. So, of course, giving them the discussion of how it's ineffective not to go to school, right? But, not harping on that negative behavior. Uh, again, having that conversation, but it doesn't have to be a full scold. Stating the positive behavior and comment on the effect that it will have on them. And again, encouraging those kiddos to face their fears, and lead with confidence and autonomy that'll serve them long, long after they finish school or grade school. So if schools make accommodations, we can't keep them forever, unfortunately. Same thing with the reinforcers, okay? You're not going to reinforce your child forever, meaning you're not going to, I have some parents who give their kid like $1 a day, $2 a day, right, to go to school. They feel like that's doable. And so I always say it's not going to last forever, right? We certainly don't want to break our parents' bank here, but we also do want to dangle that carrot and have them grab for it. Right? Same thing will occur at school. They're not just not going to have classwork forever, right? So if we can really, notice those patterns, sometimes parents make some accommodations too for our kiddos, right? Like calling them out sick if they're not actually sick, or picking them up from school early if their kiddo is spam texting them, right? So really identifying these targets, choosing the one that's most appropriate, making your plan, sticking to it, and having kind of a backup plan in case things hit the fan. All right, using our support networks and pulling back slowly but surely to create more normalcy and the full expectation. So this is an example of gradual exposure, which is essentially like a very slow climb. However, to get to our ultimate goal, right? So say the child, we're, starting small, kiddo wakes up on time, boom, we want to reinforce them. got you a muffin, warmed it up for you. Good job. They get on the bus, boom, here's your phone. Good work. Maybe they have to start really, really slow by sitting in guidance for a bit. Still, we're reinforcing. If we then move to 1 to 3 classes, we reinforce, reinforce, reinforce until we get up to the top where that student is now going to school 5 days a week, 9 periods a day. If they're in high school, let's say, for example, right? But we have to start somewhere. It might feel like a slow and gradual climb, but we must start somewhere. So the child is going to help us figure out what that starting point is. They're going to help us understand what they want to earn as a reward. And slowly but surely, we're going to shape that behavior by climbing up and up the ladder. So if your kiddo does decide to stay home, right, we have to create a routine. We can't get them to budge. We must create a routine that is going to be non-rewarding. All right. So we want them to, still get up on time, out of their jammies, brush their teeth, do their morning routine. And then we actually want them in a space in their home, in the home, if they are refusing school, where they can do their work. So a space specifically designated to do their schoolwork. Hopefully that's out of their bedrooms, definitely out of their beds, not doing work in bed, sitting somewhere structured. They do their schoolwork. And then once they complete their schoolwork, they would then have chores, because we want to make home boring. We want to make home boring. We want to make it non-rewarding. All right. So we're taking away the electronics. All right. We're not giving them unnecessary attention. All right. We're not allowing them to watch TV or play video games. And they can't leave the house and go do other fun things. Lots of structure. Lots of it. So we need a trifecta. You're working hard. We know it. The school is working hard. And of course, your kiddo is working hard. Everybody needs to come together and work together as a team, right? In order to really support these children and families. So some takeaways, right? Predictability, structure, lots of support, right? Modeling healthy coping, helping them understand, more about their emotions, how they can deal with their avoidance or anxiety in a different way. Talking about things in a non-judgmental way, using open-ended questions, doing your regular check-ins, and validating their feelings. And lastly, focusing on their strengths. Every student is resilient. Every kid is resilient. Right? So empowering them. Again, motivating them. Believing in them. We can totally break this pattern. So, about my program. All right. We serve like 42 school districts on Long Island. All right. Cohen's had partnered with these school districts, and it's essentially like a behavioral health urgent care, if you will. All right, because our main goal is to do crisis intervention and get you linked to an ongoing provider for your kiddo. All right, so here's some of the school districts that we serve. We have 3 locations on Long Island. We have one in Mineola, one in Rockville Center, and one in Comac. All right, and so I work out of the Mineola and Rockville Center offices, and that's where I see my students. For the people who can't travel there, we do telehealth for the Comac office. If your child does not partner with us in one of these districts, then you are welcome to go to the Cohen's Children's Medical Hospital. They have an urgent care there for crisis evaluation and intervention. However, the school avoidance program is not available at the Queens location, all right, which is in New Hyde Park. So unfortunately, if your school district did not partner with us, we are unable to help support. Now, this is my screening criteria. All right. Usually lots of these kids, like I mentioned, have a mental health struggle, depression, anxiety, some type of mood disorder. They usually have dysregulation, and the acuity is high. It's so much easier to change behavior when the onset of the behavior is more new. So it's we like to try to really focus on that population, though, like I mentioned before, a lot of kids who have school avoidance, this behavior started during the pandemic. So I try to be flexible on that for sure. But the longer that the behavior goes on, the harder it becomes to treat. And my program is a short-term intervention. I'm not following these kids in a long-term realm. We definitely want the kids who have been in school in the last month and they're motivated to go back. All right. If they're not motivated, it's going to be like pushing an immovable boulder. And that makes, again, the work really hard. Though if the parents are willing to do the work, then we can certainly do that as well. Now, some exclusion criteria would be if the symptoms are super severe, they require a medication trial, or we have to target those symptoms before we try to incorporate them back into school, then that's always important because, again, I only have 4 to 6 weeks to do this work. And so if it's going to take 4 weeks alone just for the meds to kick in, then it's probably better that we start a little bit later, right? If there's active suicidal ideation, we definitely want to target life-threatening behaviors first. All right, school comes further on the list. There's no school if there's no motivation to live, right? If the school is unsafe, right, then I wouldn't encourage a kid to go back because their anxiety is actually doing something correct, right? That the kid's in danger. I'm not going to force a kid to go back to school, right? That wouldn't make sense. Or if there's been a lot of other interventions that have been trialed, then we'll likely make a recommendation for a higher level of care. So when a student comes into the behavioral health center or they're being referred to the behavioral health center, whoever is completing that referral can click off school avoidance for reasons for assessment. That is then going to flag the school refusal assessment scale that I broke down before about those 4 functions of avoidance. And my staff will meet with the student and the family to determine if they're appropriate for the program, right? Meaning, again, they're motivated. Their symptoms aren't so severe. They don't need a higher level of care right away, right? They don't need hospitalization and things like that. And once the initial meeting has been completed, my staff will then make an appropriate recommendation for ongoing therapy and or potentially to work with me. Now, what I offer is truly a tailored intervention. I pride myself on this. Again, I created this program and I took lots of months to do lots of literature review and make sure that I'm doing, giving the best possible work and commitment to my patients. And so it's 4 to 6 weeks that we offer this program. It's usually weekly sessions. Usually parents are involved in every session, but majority of the work is usually done with the student unless the child is really struggling in function 3 and function 4. I offer to give lunch and learns. These are weekly on Tuesdays at noon, opportunities for parents of students with school avoidance to come in and learn about the presentation and what they can do at home to help support their kiddo. So through individual therapy, parent coaching, family therapy, these parent webinars, consultations with the school if the family gives us the permission to speak with them or outpatient providers. Again, it takes a village to do this work sometimes, so we want everybody involved. And at times we have done morning coaching calls if necessary. This is just a little blurb on my webinar. The next one will be tomorrow. It's the second one. And essentially is the who, what, when, where, why, and how of school avoidance. And lastly, these are resources, all right? This is essentially on the left-hand side, like a hierarchy of support that we can offer to students. So it might start with maybe once a week of outpatient therapy and once a month of psychiatry. From there, we just pin on more support as we go. So CSPO, a child single point of access, invites people from the community agencies to come into the home and give some in-home support. COPS is comprehensive outpatient behavioral services, which is typically group therapy, individual therapy, some family work as well. Alternative school would offer more of a smaller environment. Usually some school districts do have their own alternative school, where it's a smaller, it's usually maybe like a 10 to 1, maybe 10 students for one teacher, where they're getting more hands-on support. Their days might start later, for example. Intensive day treatment and partial hospitalization are somewhat very similar, just different environments. So IDT would be in a school environment, intensive day treatment, that is, and partial would be in a hospital environment. The length of time will vary, but it's typically around 30 days for IDT and a little bit less for partial, but they're getting school therapy, group therapy, medication management, family therapy, all under one roof. PINS stands for Persons in Need of Supervision. This invites the family court to get involved to mandate a child to go to school if nothing else is working. Sometimes that can do a beautiful trick. Charlie Health is an intensive outpatient program. It is virtual and it has multiple days a week of therapy. And lastly, Newport Academy is a residential facility, and that is specifically in Connecticut, and they have a school avoidance track. For some reading material on the right-hand side, you have When Children Refuse School, which is the CBT approach created by Kearney and Albano. Like I mentioned before, those are the folks who pioneered the SRASR assessment. Helping Your Child Overcome Separation Anxiety or School Refusal is a step-by-step guide for parents. Overcoming School Refusal is a practical guide for parents, teachers, school counselors. And lastly, the School Avoidance Alliance, big fan of this website. Jane Dempsey created this website and alliance. Her son struggled with school avoidance, and really this is such a beautiful program. There's a bunch of free guides on there, a bunch of really great resources and tips and tricks. So definitely take a peek. That actually will conclude my portion of this presentation. I would love to give the floor back to Dr. Namdar to let me know any questions that we might have missed.
Sure. So I think the sign of a great presentation is when we're flooded with questions, and we have reached a point in the webinar where the Q&A box is exploding and the chats are also exploding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pose one question for you. I think after looking at all the questions, I think you covered responses to a lot of them. In the interest of time, people are writing in about individual situations that they're dealing with. Because of the number of questions we're getting, I'm just going to have to address things by common themes, and we want to get to the Q&A momentarily with Dr. Eliza Froelich. So I'm just going to ask you quickly, one question that keeps coming up is, often you have a child that's dealing with school refusal and school avoidance, and you're saying that we should create structure within the day and try to make the home environment as similar to the school environment. But practically speaking, what do we do if both parents are working?
Right, right. That's one of our biggest struggles. That's what I was mentioning before, to pull from the community, right? Do we have other family members who can come and sit in with the kiddo? Do we have, neighbors who can kind of hold down the rule of the house, or do we even consider hiring a babysitter? I know that those things seem intense, and yet, I don't want to encourage, I've seen families go on FMLA for this, so I wouldn't want to encourage that. But again, how else can we kind of get creative and use the community resources that we might have? Some parents have like completely locked down. If you don't want to like remove your kid's cell phone because you have to keep in contact with them, you might not have a landline. I've encouraged families to just completely restrict all applications except for being able to communicate with the caregivers. You might even, I know it seems invasive, but you might even set up like a camera to make sure that they're not leaving the house, things like that, to again enhance any bit of supervision that you possibly can, to really, really remove, again, like those more rewarding activities.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I know that our audience, people are coming from all over, so the resources that are on this screen right now can provide you with more information as to where you can access support. You're welcome to take a screenshot of it and look into any of these resources. Nicole, people are asking if they would like to get in touch with your program or with you. If you could just share how they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will throw it in the chat. The three locations of and the numbers, the phone numbers of those places. so that you can give us a call and make an appointment at the behavioral health center that your child would belong to. And all of our front desk uh ladies are amazing. They'll direct you in the right place that you got to go. So I will put
Okay.
the numbers and in the chat for you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. We're now going to shift over to I think we can stop the screen share at the moment. Are you finished? Okay, great. Okay, now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Eliza Froelich. We're going to try to get to some of the questions that are in the chat. And we're going to try to answer some of the responses that are some of the things that are coming in now. I see a question that relates to the idea, Dr. Froelich, you've been in this field for 29 years now. You're a psychologist, you're a school psychologist at a Jewish day school, and you're involved in many, many initiatives. Do you feel that school refusal or school-related anxiety has increased in the Jewish day school community or yeshiva world since you started in the field? And what do you think may be contributing to this?
First of all, Dr. Namdar, thank you so much for having me. And I always look forward to your informative OHEL seminars. So thank you for having me. And Nicole, thank you for this all-encompassing presentation with practical strategies to implement. Before I answer this question, I want to start off with a story. Early one morning, a mother went to her sleeping son and woke him up. "Wake up, son, it's time to go to school." "But why, mommy? I don't want to go to school." "Give me 2 reasons why you don't want to go to school." "1, all the children hate me. 2, all the teachers hate me." "Oh, that's no reason. Come on, you have to go to school." "Give me 2 reasons why I should go to school." "1, you're 52 years old. 2, you are the principal of the school." I smile every time I hear that story because the first thing it does is it normalizes it for us all, even as adults. We have moments of anxiety and days we don't want to do our job. So as parents and educators who might be struggling with a child who's having a hard time going to school, I want you to just take a moment to breathe and to empathize with the child and realize there are days that we have a hard time too. And it's doable. We can do this. So now getting back to your question, I absolutely have seen an increase since I began working in schools 29 years ago. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for it. I know Nicole alluded to that the research shows, I don't necessarily see it in my school, to be honest, but the research does show that since COVID, there's been an increase. I think it's because before COVID, students who were on the cusp of school avoidance, after COVID, they started refusing completely because once the pandemic hit and we introduced remote learning, kids became comfortable in their homes. And for those with pre-existing anxiety, they had a harder time coming to school. So I think that's an overall global thing that we're seeing. But I think that I'm definitely seeing an increase in, like I said, the 29 years, and I'm going to say it's because I think kids are experiencing anxiety at record levels. And I'm going to have to refer to one of my favorite books, Dr. Jonathan Haidt. And if you haven't read it yet, The Anxious Generation, a must read for all parents and to educators. There's been like an alarming trend in the surge in teenage depression from 2010 to 2023. And this is not coincidental. For those of you who've read the book, you know that it's the same time as widespread social media and cell phone use. And so I can testify that I'm living the research that Dr. Haidt refers to in his book. Today's children and teens are constantly connected to their phones. It's not surprising that their self-esteem, their whole worldview, how they see each other is really connected to what people are texting them, what people are posting, comparing their life to other kids constantly, the social connections that they have, they don't have, and the FOMO, all of that. And so no matter how many times we ask kids not to do all of this in our social emotional classes that we have in school, they're still doing this. And it's even more intense among the girls. So I really think that the anxiety and particularly social anxiety has increased school avoidance. I'm going to just add a couple more items. Another item that I'm noticing, it's gotten harder to get kids to return to school because they are accustomed to connecting and socializing virtually. So when children are having a social difficulty, a tiff with a friend, they're upset about a social situation, they're less comfortable with social difficulties than they used to be. And so that's often the root with the older kids, middle and high schools, often the root of why they're not going to school. And so I spend much of my time helping mediate in-person conversations with friends that kids this age should be able to do on their own. And they're unable to, they're not comfortable. They just want to text their friend things. Um, I think also getting to, I did more technology that kids nowadays really self-soothe through using technology. And so when children are upset, they seek out technology, or their parents hand them technology to get them to stop crying. Like how many of us have been in waiting rooms in a doctor's office or in a grocery store when the upset child and the parent just hands them a phone here. And so in school, they're not allowed, hopefully, to have their phones. And when they're upset, they have a hard time soothing themselves because they don't have that connection. And so we need to really help our kids, calm themselves without technology. So I think that's like another piece. I'm going to add two more things. I think also more parents are working remotely from home. So I think that's easier for school avoidant kids to stay home because they know their parents will be there. One more change that I'm going to end with, and I noticed since we're working in the field, and I'm going to reference two other books that I think are must-reads for parents and educators, both by Dr. Wendy Mogul, The Blessing of a Skin Knee and The Blessing of a B-. And in her book, she stresses the importance of allowing our kids to struggle and to fail. And if we overprotect them from feeling pain, they're also protected from growth. So if they're insulated, they're incapable of dealing with any adversity, and they become what she says, teacups that chip like a teacup when they confront any difficulty. So we, and I'm including myself, as parents nowadays are so different from parents 30 years ago when I started. We're too coddling. We do anything to save our children from discomfort and anxiety to the extent that when they face an anxiety-provoking situation, they're unable to handle it. I too am guilty. I'm including myself. They cannot face going to school if school is anxiety-provoking for them. So I think those are a lot of the changes that I'm seeing, which all lead to like an uptick in school avoidance.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Furliff. With all your years of experience and having dealt with so many different kinds of students navigating school refusal and supporting families, what would you say was the most impactful in terms of what factors were most crucial in ensuring a successful reintegration of a student back to school after struggling with school avoidance or school refusal?
There's so many, some Nicole mentioned already. Of course, the school parent partnership is critical. There has to be like a balance of the school hearing out the parents hearing out the school. As a school psychologist, I'm literally, as we speak, dealing with a child in my middle school who's having school avoidance right now. I'm in contact with the parents sometimes twice a day. It has to be constant. I think it's also important that again, Nicole mentioned the importance of the private practitioner being in touch with the school guidance counselor. And the reason why this is so important is because the recommendations are not the same for every child. So for example, we have a child recently who the private practitioner working with the child would like us to keep the child updated, like to how many days she's missed. So that's part of the process of like, you just missed 20 days. You just missed 30 days. Now, on my own, I would not think to do that, but that was part of her process versus another child who's more similar to what Nicole said. The practitioner said, that's just going to make her anxious. She's not going to come. So that connection with the private therapist is key. The parents need to give the school permission, and that relationship needs to be developed. Of course, the teachers who are willing to implement the recommendations. And like Nicole said, the accommodations, the modifications, the changes, whatever it is, the child's having a hard time with partner work for now, the teacher will assign the partners in the classroom. Whatever we can do to get the child in the building, that's our goal. Obviously, the goal is to eventually get the child to tolerate picking partners, but for now, that's what it is. And so I think obviously that's key. I want to just mention one thing that Nicole doesn't have the luxury to really deal with as much. I mean, obviously, I'm in contact with the teachers constantly, but also I have access to the peer group. And the peer group is essential because especially if social avoidance is a social difficulty as part of the avoidance. So I will talk to the group of friends and say, well, what can we do to make this child feel more welcome? What needs to change in the dynamics in the school that's doable? I've spent time with kids of a friend, and we've been brainstorming ideas of like what we can do to help this girl feel more comfortable in school. Sometimes assigning the child a peer buddy. who will be with them, who's going to meet them in the hallways before they arrive. We have a child right now who got permission not to come for the beginning of tefillah, of prayers, because everyone's like, hey, what's going on? It's too many people. And so we've asked the children not to clamor around her at the lockers. Like, we need to work with the peer group as well. The other adults in the building, and I just want to add, like, again, examples, like we have a child who's very artistic. We used the art teacher as a help. Like, she was an assistant in the art room for much of the day. Briefing teachers on recess duty and davening duty, like what to look out for. This is not the child that you say, why were you in the bathroom? You know, this is not the child to do that. Sometimes giving the child a position of power, making them feel like they're important, making them feel like they're good at something, whatever it is, letting them work in their early childhood. Being a teacher assistant for the younger grades, that's amazing. The kids love that. A safe place in school. Now, I know that we talked about kids not feeling well. The nurse is the place where they're all going. That is school avoidance, hint, hint. So we try to avoid that, actually, because the nurse has children who are truly ill that she needs to deal with, and it gets overwhelming. So we want to find them a safe place and a safe person in the school. Sometimes that person's me. Sometimes that place is my office. Sometimes I tell the kids, I don't even need to be in my office. You need a place, you just go in there and you sit and you calm yourself down. But when they need to have a safe place or a safe person to go to, and we make that plan with the child. And I think that's important, that not only the private practitioner be involved in the plan, but I or whoever else is in that role. Sometimes it's the assistant principal who's their favorite person. That person should help with the plan, whoever it is. But they need to have an escape route, a place to go to find that safe person. So that's really, what other components I think are essential in the school.
Thank you for sharing that. I remember my days in the school building where we really did have to, for every single case, think so flexibly and just try to tailor. I remember, a student actually came to school on a Sunday and went through the building just to get comfortable getting in the door, and went on a scavenger hunt around the building to really be able to acclimate and really get that foot in the door. So I want to ask about a question that came in, and really the point was raised earlier. I know Nicole mentioned the idea, and Dr. Eliza, you mentioned the idea of partnering with the school. I know you work in a school, but I'm asking you to put on the parent hat for a minute. What if you feel like the school is not partnering with you? You're a working parent. You and your spouse are both working parents. Your child is genuinely struggling, but you feel like the school isn't partnering. Any advice that you can give on this?
Absolutely. Of course it never happens in my school, but but I definitely see that happening. And also, there are some teachers who are more accommodating, some principals who are more accommodating, different staff members in the school are more, it depends on the situation. But this is why I think it's critically important to have a private practitioner, to have a private therapist. Because it's not just a kvetchy parent calling and asking for things. It's the expert calling to say, based on my expertise and what I've, and again, in a humble way, to say, this is what I'm asking the school to do. This is what I need the school to do. So it's not just a parent requesting, it's an expert demanding something. So I think it frames the things. So that's why I think it's essential for the child to be in private therapy. I think it's so important. That really creates that relationship. Another piece, which I think is important or different, I think, in a Jewish school, is that we also have access to rabbis and rebbitzins and different people in the community, not people who are involved, leaders or sisterhood presidents, whatever is in our shuls. They're very helpful. I spend a lot of time talking to the rabbis and the leaders in our community. I feel the partnership between the school and the rabbinic leadership is essential. So there are times when, again, with permission from the parents, a parent feels that, like, I'm a psychologist, there's like a stigma to talk to me, but talking to the rabbi who's part of their home and their family life is different, and vice versa. Sometimes it's the opposite. And also, I feel that sometimes the rabbi or the rebbitzin might have some more impact on the school if the parent is feeling that they've hitting a brick wall. Sometimes that's just a helpful thing. So it's definitely reach out to those people in your community. They're really helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Another question that's come in. Has October 7th, the war in Israel and increased anti-Semitism, provoked increased school avoidance for Jewish students? So I just want to start by saying I don't believe we have any data on this question. We have heard concerns from students who are Jewish students who are attending public schools who may not feel safe. And we have been in touch with numerous people to try to work with schools to create safe spaces. And I think, it's so important to create those spaces for students. But Dr. Froelich, are you able to share any comments on that?
I mean, just in a Jewish school, and then I think a public school is a little different, but starting with the Jewish school, I mean, I'd say right after October 7th, the children in my school who had very close relatives in Israel, and especially the ones who had close relatives in the army, were missing school more than the average kid. I think it was just a hard time for them. But I think that's just anytime there's like a tragic situation going on in your life, it's not the standard school refusal things or school avoidance. It's more just like you're going through a tough time. God forbid if your mother was sick, you'd also have a hard time coming to school. Like that makes sense. That's what more of what I see. I think in general in the yeshivot, we create the aura in October 7th was we're family, we're in this together. If anything, an impetus to come to school. I don't know if my sister-in-law will be upset with me or not, but my sister-in-law is a public school teacher. And she has been working a lot with the Jewish Student Union to provide a place for her Jewish students to go. It is hard for them. It has been hard for them. And I know that there are people hopefully like this in different public schools in the area. And definitely it's worth reaching out to find out who those people are to give your children support if that's their circumstance.
Okay, thank you for that. Just another question that's come in. For a child that's struggling throughout the school day, and you have a choice of when you can send the child to school, whether it's beginning them with the beginning of the day or the last few hours of the day. Based on your experience, Dr. Froelich, is there a certain, time at which you think children should begin by attending school?
So it's interesting. I thought one thing until I recently heard a presentation by Dr. Ronanovic on school avoidance and refusal. And she suggested something which really made a lot of sense to me. And so I'm going to share it with you, but I'm going to give her credit. She felt like to end the day in success is really great for kids. So she recommends, and exposure is what Nicole was talking about, exposing them for a little bit larger until they can do the whole day. She loves the idea of doing exposure at the end of the day. She feels like leaving with everyone else at the end of the day makes you feel like I had a successful day. So if you come in at 9, but you leave at 9:30, it feels to the child as if they couldn't do it. So we've been trying that. So I'll tell you how it goes. But I recently heard her say that, and I thought that was a great idea. I mean, obviously, some of it has to do with the practical piece about when parents are available. So if a parent says they can only drop off in the morning and pick up in 2 hours later, then that's when that small amount of time in school is going to be. But I thought that was an interesting idea to see how that goes. Again, I think it depends on the child specifically also. If we know that in my school, I can just speak the way it works in my school is depending on what grade you're in, Judaic studies might be in the morning, general studies might be in the afternoon or vice versa. And if we know that this child, I literally just spoke to a child today in a situation, he is a history kid, like that's his thing. And it happens to be he has history in the afternoon. So I would make his a few hours of the day in the afternoon so he could be there for that class. So I think it really depends on the child.
Right. Okay. We are really being inundated by questions here. After just perusing the questions, I see many of them have been answered throughout the webinar. So we are going to do our best to send the recording out to you, within the next few days, and you're welcome to watch the webinar and hopefully make sure that, your questions were answered. What I wanted to just do is thank both of our panelists, Dr. Froelich and Nicole, for sharing your thoughts, your resources with us tonight. And we want to thank everybody for attending this series. As a reminder, this In It Together webinar is going to be happening on the 18th of the month. And our next webinar is in December, and it will be on supporting your child with ADHD with Dr. Nachi Felt and Lisa Scheinhaus. We want to thank everybody for coming to this webinar tonight. Unfortunately, we were not able to get to all of the questions, but I hope that we were able to reach most. And we will share some resources with you when we send out the recording. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. And we want to wish you and your families a good night and a happy early Thanksgiving. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, good to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.